All right, I'm going to call the Board of Water and Wastewater Commissioners meeting agenda for Thursday, November 19th, 2020 at 8 o'clock to order. I'm going to take a roll call vote, roll call by voice. Alan?
Here.
Judith?
Here.
Okay, and I'm here, obviously. To start the meeting off, we don't have November 5th meeting minutes to go over. No abatements and no old unfinished business. We have some new business. I'm gonna ask Dan or Sandy to take the lead on it. I do ask, if you're not speaking, please go on mute to eliminate some of the background noise. Dan or Sandy?
Yeah. All right. So let's kick off right with the wastewater budget. So in your packet, there is 3 versions of the FY22 wastewater budget. So before we start to dive into the numbers, I just want to go through some of the assumptions and things that we had to look at and look into in developing for FY22. So last year we were provided with Chatham's sewer operating budget, their FY21 budget requests, and that was used to inform Harwich's share for our fixed and flow variable expenses. We have not been provided yet with an FY22 budget for Chatham Sewer Department. So you'll see in the first or the third column over from the left in a column with a header escalation factor. So that column represents the assumptions I made for Chatham's budget to bring it up to what I anticipate they could be requesting for FY22. So you'll see regular wages at the top. That's the Harwich's share of the DPW director salary for Chatham. What I did was escalated that at 3%, which was consistent with the prior 2-year increase in salary for Chatham's DPW director. Moving down to expenses, looking at their historic budget figures, I level funded items that they had traditionally level funded, like you'll see testing, electric, gas, the first 5 items there. The first big one that sees an escalation is the contract services, which is Chatham's contract with their operators at Weston and Sampson. So when they provided Harwich with a planning budget document for last year's budget, one of the conditions in the contract that they had stipulated was that the contract would be escalated at an index or 3.5%, whichever is greater. So with that, I just had assumed that Chatham would have a similar escalation factor and applied that to their FY21 request. Operational supplies, building and grounds were level funded. Water treatment chemicals, I had used their FY19 actual figure, which was more than their FY21 request. And that was it for escalation on Chatham's budget. Moving down, we have, you'll see on the leftmost column where it says HAR, those are Harwich specific sewer operating expenses. So these are the expenses that are going to be tied to our operation of the 4 pump stations and the cleaning and maintenance of the collection system. So the first line item we have is contract operations, which is presently budgeted at $300,000. I expect this number to go down considerably. The reason it is still currently at $300,000 is this was based off, if you go in the packet, it is page 4 of the wastewater budget package, which you can see on the top of the page has contract operations estimate. So as I just mentioned, Weston and Sampson had provided a planning level budget document for us last year, or this year, February of this year. And they had estimated a total annual contract sum of $375,000. And that was to manage and operate the 5 pump stations that were in the original phase 2 scope. If you recall, some of that was trimmed back. So I used that 375,000 to back into an annual cost per station and then a monthly cost per station. So these figures in this $375,000 planning document included a large amount of equipment that they anticipated that the operators would need, right? So a truck and a vehicle to get between the pump stations, use of a vac truck and other operational equipment that I believe we're going to be able to save on as soon as we get to sit down at the table with Chatham. And the thought is that we'll be able to share some of the equipment and to defray some of those expenses, because when they did put this document together, they had estimated the 375 as a 3-year contract, and they amortized the vehicles that they would be using over that 3 years. So I could see, this number being reduced by, $100,000 if things go well. But until we get the opportunity to sit down with Chatham and Weston and Sampson, we won't be able to further reduce that. Moving forward, back up to the budget page in expenses. For us, we have generator maintenance. There's going to be 4 generators with the 4 big pump stations. Using our annual cost for what we carry in the water department, it's about $450 per generator. There's going to be 4 permanent generators and then a 5th potential that I'd like to talk about a little bit further down. We have electric utility, natural gas, printing, and postage, which are pretty straightforward. And then the last one is a SCADA line item, which is new to this year's budget. With the new system, there's likely going to be some sort of hiccups in the instrumentation and the programming. It's never 100% smooth when you put these things online. So the $3,000 will cover, likely 2 visits from a SCADA contractor, should we need them, over the course of the next fiscal year. So as I mentioned, there's 3 separate budget pages in the packet here. One, if you look at the top green tab, says FY22 Wastewater Budget 1-year order to connect. The second page is a 2-year order to connect, and then the third one, it would be a worst case scenario with an average hookup rate of 5 sewer services per month. So to just put why I did that into perspective, to jump to the 4th page, which is titled FY22 Estimated Sewer Service Connections and Flow Projections. So if you recall from the IMA and the meeting we had a couple weeks ago about expenses we have fixed expenses that we're going to be sharing with Chatham, as well as flow variable expenses that we're going to be sharing with Chatham. Our flow variable expenses are things like chemicals. The more flow, the more chemicals we use. So we're going to have to, that's the mechanism for us to account for that. So the way that the IMA dictates how the flow variable costs are shared is Harwich's flow is compared as a percentage to Chatham's flow. So what's represented on this document is in the leftmost columns, you'll see Chatham wastewater flows. So these are historic flows provided by Chatham's wastewater treatment plant. So like it is with water, the more water we pump in the summer, the same is true in wastewater. They see higher flows in the summer, lower flows in the winter, right? So we have to, let me see. All right, so let me just figure out the best. It can be very confusing, so I don't want to jump too far in and before I have it all clearly laid out in my head. So FY22 Q1, which is our July, August, and September, accounts for 48.92% of all of Chatham's flow for their wastewater treatment plant. So just similar to us, our summer season is the peak. Now, when we were talking about 1 year order to connect, versus a 2-year order to connect. So a 1-year order to connect would require 36.67 services be installed every month for 12 months in order for everyone in the phase 2 area to be connected. That's an incredibly large amount of work to be done in a month. That leaves no time for restoration. I mean, it's an advantageous outlook to try to accomplish that many. There's been discussions amongst this board as well as the selectmen and the health board of health to extending from a 1-year order to connect to a 2-year order to connect. So that will drop our connection rate in half. So instead of installing 36 services a month, would be installing 18 services per month. So you can see in the columns to the right of each of the 1-year to connect, 2-year to connect, or the Chatham hookup rate, you'll see Harwich's flow as a percentage of Chatham. So that in the top 1-year to connect, you see 1.06%, 1.29%, 6.25%. So what those are, if we jump back up to the budget and looking at the first quarterly flow variable expense column, you will see quarterly flow as a percentage of annual for Chatham, which is at 48.92%. And then you'll see in the next column, Harwich quarterly flows as a percentage of Chatham, which is at 1.29%. So to apportion the budget to the appropriate quarters for the flow variable expenses, like water treatment, like treatment chemicals, and I use that because it's the easiest one, I think, to understand. So if we look at the chemicals line item, I've estimated a budget figure of $47,500 for FY22. So I anticipate, due to the flows, that Chatham will expend 48.92% of their water treatment chemical expenses within that quarter, that first quarter. So per the IMA, we are to pay 1.29% of Chatham's chemicals for that first quarter, as that is our percentage of Chatham's wastewater flow. So that math carries through for each quarter. So the big difference between having a 1-year order to connect, a 2-year order to connect, or an extremely slow pace of, say, 5 services per month equates to a dollar value of about $20,000 difference in expenses for FY22. So counterintuitively, maybe, or maybe not, the 1-year order to connect will cost us more in operational expenses than the 2-year order to connect and the worst case order to connect. And that's attributed to the flow variable component of the budget. Now, what that doesn't take into effect is that with a 2-year or a longer hookup period, that's going to have a more detrimental impact on the revenues for supporting the budget. So I wanted to represent the difference in operating expenses, as we move forward with the rules and regulations and solidify a 1-year order to connect versus 2 years. So you can see what that looks like in the budget. And then as for how did I develop what our flows were, right? If we jump back down to that estimated sewer service connections and flow projection sheet. So you'll see, looking at the 1-year order to connect, the estimated connections 36 with an estimated wastewater flow of 200,880 gallons in that first quarter. I'm looking at Q4 of April 2021. So where did the 200,000 gallons come from, right? So if you go to the last page in the wastewater budget package, there's an Excel document with the weighted average of wastewater flows per parcel. That's just a black and white spreadsheet if you're thumbing through the pages here. So this was actually an extraction of work that was done for the Pleasant Bay watershed, but what I did for that was extract the sub-watershed parcels for contracts 1 and contract 2. I looked at the 2013 to 2019 average gallons per parcel per year. And you can see that the average daily use varies considerably between, you know, these areas in East Harwich, which they're all neighbors. But if you look at, you know, the, let's see, Mill Pond contract 1, there's 13 parcels in Robert Hour's contract presently, and they have an average daily use of 165 gallons a day of water. Now, contract 1 in the Upper Muddy Creek, you'll see there's 152 parcels with an average water use of 267 gallons per day, right? So to try to get an accurate representation of what an overall average is for the Phase 2 sewer area, I took a weighted average of all of those individual contract areas and came up with an average wastewater daily flow of 186 gallons per day per parcel. So jumping back up to the estimated connections and flow projections, the 200,000 is a simple calculation of 36 customers times 186 gallons per day times 30 days in a month, or 31 or 28, whatever it was. And that's how that equation works out. And that's how these flow estimates were developed. Now, this is just a linear, you know, assumption for hookup rate. I would expect that between, you know, November, December, January, February, maybe even middle of March, the hookup rate's going to decrease significantly due to, you know, the holidays, frozen ground, difficulty of excavation, things like that. So to reiterate the point that, you know, 36 services a month is a big ask, in my opinion, for this. And I think that sums up the development. And I guess I would look to you for questions, comments, concerns.
That's easy for you to say.
The way that it's structured does not really make it easily understandable. You know, there's so many, and the fact that we have so many unknowns too, to have to build these estimates.
Yeah, it would be so much easier.
Good, Alan.
All right. It'd be so much easier if we had a timeline that, you know, instead of a you know, guesstimating 1 year, 2 year, whatever, you know, it sure would make it easier.
Right.
So we need, in order to really do it right, we need to have the Board of Health make a decision, you know? So to me, that's the first step.
Well, it's, yeah, and then, so the Board of Health did pen a memo to the selectmen stating that they did support a 2-year hookup window.
Okay.
The selectmen, I believe, had took that. I can't recall specifically if they voted to officially make that the rule or not, but this is within the purview of the Wastewater Commission, as it is identified in the rules and regulations as to the hookup window, if you will. So having a 1 year, and I guess another log to add to the fire, just because we state people need to hook up in 1 year or state that they need to hook up in 2 years isn't a guarantee that we're going to get 100% compliance. I've been to a good percentage of the properties in East Harwich, and there is, you know, it is split. There's a considerable amount of people who are interested, looking forward, you know, looking to help with cleaning the environment, and there's a percentage also that would prefer to dig their heels in. So, we can state 1 year or 2 years, but when we look at revenue and we start to look at sewer rates, it's going to be a much more important discussion to have, as the amount of people that connect and the revenue that's generated from sewer use is going to have a direct impact on the general fund and the subsidy that they need to provide to the water operation or wastewater operations. So it's appropriate for all to be involved, but we have to be realistic in what we can expect the folks in East Harwich to connect, and make sure we're responsible in how we're budgeting for that. So.
Yeah, thanks for you and Sandy for putting this all together. Obviously, there's a lot of information here, a lot of unknowns, as we all know. I think it's just going to be see how it goes as we go, unfortunately. But at this time, does anybody have any questions regarding the wastewater budget as it's presented right now? Alan?
No, I'm all set. Like I say, I think you've covered all the bases you can cover, especially where it's all estimates and all the particular scenarios are there. So I would say at this point, I'm going to go with what's presented, and send it down the line, see what comes back.
If I may,
Okay, Judith. Oh, good. Dan, good.
Yeah, just one more thing I forgot to note. So as I mentioned with contract operations, that figure is still in flux and will likely go down. Another thing that was not included in the budget that may add to it is indirect expenses. So Carol and I had a quick conversation last week regarding indirects and the thought of shifting some of the indirects for water staff, myself, admin support staff that will be working under the sewer budget as well, to shifting some of the obligation of those indirects over and off of the water enterprise to the sewer enterprise. So that would be something that would be added to this. And that is also true when we start talking about the water budget. We're still waiting on indirect figures from the finance department. So those have not been updated to date with what you're looking at.
As far as wastewater?
We do not, correct, wastewater, and we do not have
Okay.
figures yet for water either.
Okay.
So
Judith, any questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Alan.
I think you need to add that indirect number in there, so the offsets for water, the time, potential time that this will take, and your time, and let's make part of it who's involved.
Mm-hmm.
So Judith?
I'm just wanted to ask for clarification. Are all the assumptions based on year-round homes? I mean,
As far as
does it
flows,
change? Yeah. I'm just wondering if it's got an impact or not. I mean, I know.
I didn't look to see, to pull pull parcel by parcel and see if any of them are seasonal.
Yeah.
East Harwich
I mean,
is typically more year-round than Harwich Port.
right.
Yeah.
So we haven't done, at least in this exercise, haven't seen what there is for seasonal.
And I'm thinking of those folks that just go away for the winter months, which obviously is not happening for some time.
Yeah, and I guess so. When I did the parcel by parcel weighted average for the wastewater flows, that was a 6 or 7 year average of 2013 to 2019.
Oh, perfect.
So that should, you know, if there's seasonality within that, it would have been captured and averaged out in the weighted average process. Now, where we, you know, looking, you know, day by day, month by month, you know, we would see a greater fluctuation likely than weighted average distributed evenly. But I don't think on an annual basis it would have too much of an impact beyond what's been captured.
Okay, thanks. Good work.
A lot of work.
Thank
Thank you.
A lot of work there. Yeah.
Danny,
And might I add, please,
Yeah.
that this is all Dan. The wastewater budgeting is all in Dan's department right now.
Dan,
So
I
I'm
take
learning
that
from
off
him
you.
as much as I can, just like you guys.
Wow. This is impressive.
Just trying
So,
to fill in the gaps, you know, with all the unknowns, just fill in the gaps with the best available data we have, you know.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of unknowns.
Dan, do you have anything else you want to add to the wastewater before we move on to the water budget?
No.
All right, thank you for all of this information. And again, it's gonna be a lot to keep reviewing and going over until we get some actual numbers and figures and actual hookup time, so thank you.
All right.
Let's move on to the water budget.
So moving on to the water budget. Before we dive into the numbers, just want to touch on and reiterate the budget message that was distributed from the Board of Selectmen. So we were asked, departments were asked to prepare a level funded budget. Level funded in the sense that we will not be increasing the bottom line. We were instructed not to include any cost of living increases for FY20. We were instructed to include any contractual things like step increases for people who are still within the steps, things of that nature. And any increase, you know, that was reflected in salary and wages would have to be a subsequent decrease in our expense line item. So just so when we're jumping in, when we're talking about increases and decreases, it is to adhere to that bottom line 0% increase. Now, like with the wastewater, we did not have indirect expense calculations yet. So this being a draft, we will likely, if those do go up, which I anticipate they may not due to the shift of some indirects to the wastewater operating budget. So we may be in decent shape, but if the indirects do go up, we will have to then dig back into our expenses and look for other areas to cut. So I guess we'll jump right in. So there was a supplementary packet sent out yesterday afternoon. I just want to make sure that we're all looking at the correct one. Let me make sure I'm looking at the correct one here. Bear with me.
So Dan, this is the one that you sent out we should look at, is that correct?
I believe Sandy sent it out yesterday afternoon, and I believe Tracy followed up with it again. So is that
So
Sandy,
the latest email.
11/18?
It was reversed. Tracy sent the initial packet and then I followed up with a corrected packet. So it would be the most recent one. It was toward the end of the day yesterday.
I mean, if I may jump in here, the only thing that's different is the salary and wages and the meters, read devices, supplies, right?
From the original one.
You should be looking at the budget that has the salary and wages. The salary and wages should be 1,400,000, 1,040,465.
Yes.
Is that the one we should be looking at?
Yes. 1,040,465. All right. So
And the meters, read devices, and supplies Yeah, should be 121,000 instead of the 150,000.
Correct. Correct. All right, so jumping in, as I just
Okay.
mentioned, salary and
Does everybody
wage.
see that? Everybody has the right budget? They're all looking at the right budget?
Yes, yeah.
Alan?
Uh, So, yeah, I'm on the right one. Yeah.
Okay. So again, just to reiterate, the only thing that's changed are those 2 line items. Everything else has stayed the same.
Correct.
Okay? All right, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, so as I just mentioned with the selectmen's budget message, to adjust for contractual increases relative to step increases and so on, new and retired employees, et cetera. That is let me see. So like you said, 104,604,465. So that was an increase of 5%. Seasonal salary and wages. Traditionally, we've carried 4 seasonal positions, 3 for the field and 1 as an office or project assistant. Now we have been filling and expending the majority of that budget, but in an effort to balance the budget and put forward a level funded budget, we removed the seasonal project assistant from the seasonal salary and wage line item. You'll also see decreases in overtime, flushing overtime, and longevity. And that is reflected because we've had a couple of senior employees retire and some shifting within the department. So where people were at the top step, for a long time, and we'll bring new people in starting at a lower pay grade. So you're seeing that reflection there. So for the total salary increase, we have an increase of 1.08% over last year's budget request. Jumping down into expenses, fringe benefits, which covers boots and clothing, things of that nature, we increased $550. Last year, the board voted to include funding in that line item for Steve, the assistant superintendent, when he was removed from the IAMAW union and promoted to assistant superintendent. He lost his clothing allowance. So this is to supplement him in there. The electric utility was a 9.48 increase. And Sandy, if you would like to, Sandy did a new method of determining or projecting expenses for utilities. And I think it's a great process. And if you'd like to describe what you did, I would yield to you.
Thank you, Dan. So what I did is I took our actual expenses in this current fiscal year, which brought us through October. And then I looked to November through June expended this same time last year to get to a figure that was then increased by 5%.
So historically, we've looked at, our prior fiscal year actuals as an entire, prior fiscal year. And the difference here is, Sandy's taken the most recent accurate data that we have, being our expenses this fiscal year, and then piggybacked on our most recent missing expenses from last year. So I think this is a great exercise, and I think gives us a better estimate as to what we would be looking for or looking at for expenses. So continuing on, again, gas utility decreased based on actuals. We've level funded vehicle and equipment maintenance, building and grounds maintenance. Technical support agreements is a big increase. So it's up 59.84%. So this
Hey, Dan.
increase, yep.
I'm sorry, just go back to buildings and ground maintenance. For 19 and 20, we're down, between 30 and 17,000. Last year we went up to 45,000. What are we doing?
So
the buildings.
the FY21 that was 17,000, so this is really Scott's kind of line item to work out of with maintaining all the pump houses and everything. 2020, he was out for several weeks with surgery, so that was the reason we didn't expend it there. But that covers, when we redid all the ceilings in the pump stations, rebuilding the roof hatches, residing, shingling, any miscellaneous item that would be upgraded, fixed, repairs. Right now we have some plumbing work going on. We're reworking some of the meters in the pump houses. So that could be paid for out of our building and grounds maintenance. Things like mowers, pack blowers, things to maintain the acreage, if you will. And when we were looking at cuts, that line item was considered. But I instead of cutting from there, I was more comfortable cutting it from professional services. For the reason that I don't want to limit. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't want to limit the staff's ability to maintain and do their job. So
Right.
that item was considered.
I agree.
A couple times. So that for that purpose.
I prefer we don't.
No, I agree. I mean, the building and grounds, but even if, I'm sorry,
think
Alan, go ahead.
You guys gotta speak one at a time and turn off the mics.
Go ahead, Alan.
Okay, I prefer we don't mess around with that. I mean, some of these places are old, they've been there for years. And, to turn your back to it over budget cuts, we've done that many, many years in a row. And I think it's important to take care of what we have got, I'd rather see us do it elsewhere, but to let that, it's not big money, it's not like it's, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just chump change in a big picture. So I would let that stand.
Well, I agree that building and grounds is a top priority because I think we need to maintain, the property that we have. But I'm just looking back at 2019, the year before Scott was out, and we spent, a little over 29,000. And then for 21, we budgeted 45. I'm just wondering, even if we went from that 29 to 35,000, but again, I mean, I'm all for maintaining our property. I mean, that's a huge, benefit that we have as a department. And I was just wondering if that was something we could look at.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can if the desire is to take it out of, and again, with this as a draft, we're going to be more informed ideally next meeting with figures on indirects and other, which is really one variable we have at this point.
Right. Okay, Dan, you go on. Thank you.
So the big increase in technical support agreements. So for a long time, we have not been paying maintenance on our elements. There's some of the additions, and let's talk about the additions instead of what we weren't doing. So now with the upgrade that we're doing to our work order system, we will be required to pay the annual maintenance, which is $10,000 a year. In addition to that, we have subscribed to Cape Tech Group's software management package. So this is monitoring all of the IT assets for the department, as well as our Office 365. So those are the new additions to the technical support agreements line item. I believe, was there something in there for Munis too?
No, not Munis at this time.
Okay. The next one down, building maintenance agreements, you'll see 135% increase. That is reflective of the daily COVID cleanings for the department. So that covers Made Pro coming in daily. We were informed that we would not be reimbursed for PPE moving forward unless we're public safety, fire, and a few others that were not included in. So with that guidance, we made the assumption that our COVID cleaning's not going to be covered or reimbursed through the state either. Not knowing if that's going to be a continued requirement, we did include it within our budget to fund. Laboratory services, you'll see went up $8,000 or 35.5%. That's reflective of the new PFAS regulation. So beginning this year, we're going to have to start testing quarterly for all entry points to the distribution system for perfluorinated compounds. Those tests are about $400 each at 5 entry points 4 times a year. So that's where that $8,000 comes from. Moving forward, professional services, that was cut an additional $15,000 to $60,000. Printing down 56, and that was just simply because of moving the postage to another line item. Let's see, advertising is level, postage decreased based on actuals. So this is a number we've been refining since we went quarterly. At the time, we had simply doubled based on going from 2 bills to 4 bills, and we're refining that based on actuals. Moving forward, we are level funded on communication, propane, office supplies. With presently level funded hardware, software, and office supplies, we have a number of items that we've either already purchased or intend to purchase in this fiscal year. This line item may be impacted. If you recall, we recently completed the cybersecurity evaluation through the EPA. So there's a list of action items there that we don't yet have projected out on the timeline or costs from our IT consultant yet. So at some point between now and our next meeting, we'll have to have a conversation with Cape Tech Group and make sure that we're adequately funding that. Bulk fuels decreased on actuals, treatment supplies are level, treatment chemicals. Sandy, if I'm not mistaken, used the same methodology that she did with the electric.
Yes, that's correct, Dan.
So that was taking in our most recent data and last year's actuals. Public works supplies, level funded. One of the big items that we used to support the level funding of the budget was cutting the meter read devices and supplies. You know, it was only a couple of years ago that we increased that budget. We were funding it, I believe it was $80,000 for a number of years, and in an effort to try and change out our oldest meters, we doubled that budget, and we've been trying to more aggressively pursue changing out the aged out meters and large meters, where we are limiting our exposure entering people's houses due to COVID, things of that nature, that appears to be a pretty safe place to reduce, to put forward a level funded budget. Let's see, moving forward, we're level for service installation supplies, pipes, valves, and fittings, and water main replacement. Let's see, police details is level funded. which is based on actuals from FY19. Let's see, the next big increase we have is uniforms and safety supplies, which is an increase of 10,000, which is based on our increased on our FY19 actuals as well as our year-to-date expenses for COVID. So as I just mentioned with the daily COVID cleaning, the departments are no longer going to be reimbursed for MEMA or FEMA for the acquisition of PPE. So given that I don't expect us to be out of this in the short term, we're going to need to continue providing masks and PPE and other things throughout the course of the year. Dues, subscriptions, and travel was reduced slightly. And then we get down to OPEB and debt. So the department still is presently proposing to fund OPEB in FY22. If I'm not mistaken, the town administrator had presented to the selectmen the concept of deferring FY22's OPEB payment to FY23 and doing a double in FY23. If we can afford it, if this budget, is satisfactory, and obviously we have to wait for direction from the finance department, but if we can fund OPEB, I think it would be in our best interest to do so. But if the board is looking to restore some of the line items that we cut in trade for something else, that could be a place to do it. So that covers salaries and expenses. The last page, revenue, takes into account the revenue projections from the rate study that was just done. And I believe the others are, in the comments, you'll see their averages based on our previous actuals. So, and that takes us all the way through. Sandy, if you'd like to add anything, if I missed anything, please.
No, Dan, you did a great job. We've worked on this together over the past week or two. The only thing I would just add is under these assumptions and what's presented is the final outcome of revenue less the expenses provides for, in this scenario, $142,000 surplus, which is far less, well, it's less than the 10% that the Board of Wastewater Commission prefers to have. So, and this goes back to revenues, Dan. and rate increase, right?
Yeah, and that was under our existing rates, right?
Yes, this is static, static existing rates. However, the internal rate study provided for some modification in the gallons for this current for FY22. So we used that methodology for the gallons with the same rates and to come up with this number, but no rate change, no rate increases or fees across the board.
Now, I will just state $134,000 is not a comfortable margin, if you will. It's not a comfortable margin where if we have, an extremely wet conservative year, that could go pretty quick. And if I'm not mistaken, we've seen swings in excess of over $100,000 previously in revenues from year over year. And to continue the revenue discussion, if we can for a moment, this was, again, assuming no rate or existing rates for FY22. when we met back in August and discussed rates, went through the different scenarios. I rewatched the meeting this past week. There appeared to be consensus around alternative G, which was a $10 increase to the base rate and 5% to all the tiers, which the board had discussed bringing back and implementing for fiscal year 22, which would be effective July 1st, 2020. So if the consensus remains the same, we can project revenues based on the work that was done back in August, September. If the board is thinking differently at this time, I guess I would ask, is the board thinking differently at this time?
Well,
Hey, Dave.
to
Good, Alan.
me, I just see us going back into the same old trench, like the OPED item. It was an easy item years back to eliminate, not do it now, not pay in kind of thing. And here we are. And we are really on the road. I can see it here when these level funded budgets and everything, not real, because I mean, the increases in salaries go on, all those types of things. So we start chipping away at the rest of the budget in order to, keep it going. I understand it's tough times, and it's kind of hard to step up and make rate increases during, especially this time. And so I just, it's frustrating for me when I see what's happening here. And it's probably town-wide going on. But then once we get back to smooth territory, now we have to, hurry up and do this or do that, or pay off what we should have paid off when it was happening. So for me, I'd like to see the OPED stand, and what is it going to be on the average bill if we go ahead? It'll be $10 annually, or $10 a quarter per quarter.
$10 a quarter for the base rate. So it would be an annual increase of $40 for the base rate, and then 5% for usage.
So $40 plus.
Correct.
Well, yeah, how many years? 5 years since? 5
Yep.
years? Well, I'm going to support it. I'm going to support the increase. You got to have water.
Thanks, Alan. Judith?
Was there any, I just keep looking at the solar revenue. Was there any further discussion on the water department being net zero on the electric piece?
With regard, like the cap landfill? Are we talking about the
Yeah, the cap
off-taker
landfill.
thing?
No, the cap landfill. Of
It-
increasing how much is allotted to the water department.
Oh, in terms of revenue,
Yeah.
right? So that would have to go back to, and there is a memo and an agreement between the at the time Water Commission and the Board of Selectmen that we would be treated as an off-taker for, I believe it was 3 years, and then it would be renegotiated. So we're at that point now when it needs to be renegotiated.
Yeah. We get
So-
our fair share.
Yeah.
Okay, Judith, anything about the rate increases?
No, I'm supportive of them.
All right.
Do you want it to
So,
go higher
from
than
what
what we had discussed?
No, I guess,
Okay.
so in part of, as I mentioned, the finance is going to be sending out our indirect expense, figures soon. Another thing that they typically send is recommendations for increases to utility, gas, electric, those sorts of things. They also include if there's any increases to water rates. So I'm trying to get a consensus if I should be informing them that, we're anticipating a rate increase effective July 1st with the alternative that was discussed in August.
So just to touch on what Dan was going over, we've already had this discussion and a vote in a meeting of, as far as water rates and raising the what is it, Dan? Raising the what?
Annual.
Raising the
Base rate.
the annual. So we already had,
Base rate.
yeah, we've already voted on the budget increase and the rate increase. So I believe at that time we all agreed to hold off with the whole COVID situation going on. But moving forward, I think for July 21, we need to initiate the rate increases and get our budget back on track, get it funded. Because again, the longer we postpone this, the only further behind we're going to get, and that's not good for anybody. So, with the $10 increase and the 5% across the board, I think it's a fair rate increase. Everyone will participate across the 4 tiers, and basically you're gonna be paying for what you're using, no more, no less. And I think that's the right way to go and the fair thing to do, and the most fiscally responsible thing for us to do at this point. So I believe it sounds like we're all in agreement to move forward with this, and sooner we get this in motion, the better off we will be financially, especially looking at the $142,000 in revenue for 21. So. Dan?
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to touch on, right, and Sandy and I kind of discussed this back and forth yesterday, right? So we're looking at a level, ultimately bottom line level funded budget from last year.
Yeah.
Now, it's counterintuitive because you would think with a level funded budget that the existing rates would be sufficient, and provide enough surplus as they have historically. Now, one of the things that I just want to kind of point out and make sure everyone has in the back of their head is when we're talking about expenses, we are budgeting our expenses for a dry year, right? We're budgeting so that if we got to run the pumps 24 hours a day to keep the water flowing, that we can afford to do so. And then when we look at revenue, in terms of a wet year. And what if we get a wet year? Is that revenue going to be able to fund the operation? So it's kind of they kind of conflict with each other in the sense that we're budgeting to pump and and expend on a high year and collect at a low year at the same time. And we're doing that to be conservative, to make sure that the funds are available to support the department. So just so that everyone has that in the back of their head, because we're likely all of us going to be asked, level funded budget, you're raising the rates. The reason we have to do that is because we have to budget to expend and support pumping if we need it, and we have to collect revenue just in case we don't pump. So.
And just to be clear for the listening audience, the rate increase is not based at all on COVID. This is really, because we haven't had rate increases for a number of years, and it's about operations, right?
And that's a good point, Judith. And one more thing I want to add to that, even though it is a $10 base rate increase and the 5% over the next 5 years, it's not an automatic rate increase for every year moving forward. Every year will be a rate hearing, and we will vote at that time if we will proceed with that 5% increase. So it's not 5% across the board for 5 years. There will be a rate hearing every year moving forward with that 5% in mind. And again, with the OPEB, I absolutely agree that we need to fund that. It's the right thing to do for the employees, and that's not somewhere I'm looking to cut any money out of. So,
I agree.
anything else, Dan?
Yeah, and just for those who may be following along out in the public, I would encourage, the one benefit to COVID is that all the meetings have been recorded and promptly posted on Harwich Channel 18's YouTube. So the meetings where we discussed the rates, the 10 or 11 different rate analysis that we did, the various types of rate increases that were considered, as well as the projects that those are intended to support are all available for people to go back and look to. So.
All right, is there anything else that you want to add about the water budget?
Yeah, I just want to, where do we stand on our long-term debt? What are we still paying on the treatment plants?
Treatment plants, I believe the P Lake tank. Sandy, you probably have a more quick.
I wish I had our debt schedules in front of us, but I don't, unfortunately. I know that FY22 is the last year of paying on, I believe it's the P Lake tank. Like I said, I don't have them in front of me, but I do know based on our 7-year capital plan and where we're adding on debt when debt falls off, so to speak, and looking at the schedule, there is one, this is the last payment. I believe it's for the Pleasant Lake tank.
Okay.
But I can provide a copy of the debt schedules for your next meeting to just catch you up on where all the debt is and when it's paid off in which fiscal years.
Okay. All right.
On another note, if
All
I
right,
could.
Dan, you want to move? Yep, go, Sandy.
Oh, I just wanted to add, and sort of, Dan touched on this too, that the rate increases, that the board's looking at and voting on and projecting for the future support the 7-year capital plan where projects are going to be paid all or in portion. Some of the projects will be paid for out of our retained earnings. So it is for capital needs, and it might not be next year, but in the years to come. That's all.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah.
Dan, do you want to move on to the Tyler content manager?
Yes. The finance director got in touch with me last week to just talk through some of the workflow related to this Tyler content manager. Munis, which you guys all know is the town's financial software, Munis. Well, they're also known as and owned as Tyler. So Munis and Tyler go hand in hand. So the Tyler content manager is a module of Munis that will allow the town to move toward a paperless environment. So along with implementing this module will come workflows. So she was talking to me about where we have a sign off from the board on payroll and accounts payable, and then Dan, and then it's delivered to the finance department for their processing. If this was all to become electronic, which is in the works, how would that work with board signatures and hard copies where, the board chair comes in to sign on behalf of the board? And there's room to talk about the process, but Dan and I sort of talked about, when this changes, that perhaps I can put together sort of the items that you review, the chair reviews and signs. I could put them into an email with the content, with the total, say with all the invoices listed, and provide it to the board chair for review, and sort of email response, okay, I agree with this, and approve the batch. And then it will go to Dan electronically for him to release. So it's just like electronic process of workflow. So that's all. So there might be a change with, and just the need for that signature in person and that hard copy piece of paper. And where the board members aren't Munis users, per se. This is the environment we work in, that we would, work on and potentially use this email process, whoever's the chair at the time. I could email payroll, be available for any questions or anything you see, and then seek your approval before we release it. So,
Okay.
it's fairly simple, and I, provided a 4-page, document for you to look at and see all of the potential benefits of moving in this direction.
Technology, you gotta love it.
Yeah. I think it's
Well,
going to make everything easier because, for the town, in our department, we've been paperless and we continue to work to be paperless. So we don't have a hard copy of any invoice. It's all electronic. So if you want to see a copy of an invoice, I have to go to my database list sort of in the batch and pull it up and look at it. So the town, unfortunately, they have to go to a hard copy file and pull it out.
Yeah.
And so,
Paper cuts.
yes, yeah. So I will keep you posted as this progresses, but it was an update from the finance director last week talking about signing off and signatures on payables and things that the board signs.
All right, great. Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome.
Dan, do you have anything for the superintendent's report?
Yes, if I can run through, I got a quick list here. So I just wanted to let the board know I have received the draft Word version of the wastewater rules and regulations. So I am going through that to input and update with all the board's comments. The Pleasant Lake tank project is being advertised over the next 2 weeks with a bid opening date of December 10th. In preparation for that project, we've reached out to the tech school, make sure that they don't have any issues with their fire suppression system related to pressure. We have turned the Lothrop tank back on into seasonal mode, where it would typically be running in winter mode to add additional support for the distribution system. And we're working to schedule the interior cleaning for the tank. I touched upon the new PFAS regulation when we were discussing the budget, but that is a new requirement that the regulation was passed in October, and we're going to be doing an initial sampling round, and then ideally, we have not detected PFAS yet. If that trend holds steady, we'll be able to move to reduced monitoring, but we do have to get through this initial monitoring period first. I had a meeting with the town administrator to discuss our annual town meeting for FY22 capital items. If you recall, we had a very stripped down town meeting this year, and a lot of the articles were removed, one of them being our well exploration well article. So that article, as well as our original funding request for Route 28 engineering design money, as well as the matching funds for the drinking water source protection grant funds will be in there as well. The last item related to wastewater. So the pump station on Hardin Lane in East Harwich is a small submersible station that has a 150-gallon wet well. It serves about 6 or 7 houses. Prior to phase 2 being stripped down and made into only essentially 3 construction contracts, when that happened, the tow behind generator that was originally included to be provided under the phase 2 construction was removed and placed in the contract 3 area, which has not been put out to bid yet. So the Hardin Lane station, which has that small grinder pump, does not currently have a generator or backup power. So I personally have no intention of asking those people to connect without having a mechanism to provide them with backup power should the power go out, that they would still be able to use their household plumbing. So I reached out to Carol to discuss this with her. I also spoke with Joe. when we had developed the FY21 wastewater budget, at the time, the construction schedule for the projects had anticipated concluding around January, if I'm not mistaken. So the latest construction schedule we got a couple weeks ago is looking like they will be wrapping up in April. So because we had budgeted funds to start operating the collection system based off of that initial estimate, I believe that we're going to have some excess funds within the sewer operating budget for the current fiscal year. So right now I am working to size out and price out a generator for that unit on Hardin Lane. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed as to what was going on there and what we're doing to try to reconcile it. And that's all I have.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Anything for the commissioner's report?
No, I'm
Nothing?
good.
Okay. We're looking at our next meeting.
Which I believe we discussed at the last meeting.
December 3rd?
Yeah.
At 1 o'clock. Okay. Sounds good. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait a minute. When's the next meeting?
December 3rd at 1 o'clock.
Got it. Okay. All right. I move to
Adjourn.
I'll
Is there a second?
that. There's a second.
All right, I'll take a vote by roll call. Alan,
Aye.
Judith,
I
and it's an aye for myself. All right, thank you everyone for really all the work, budgets, and
yeah. Good job.
we won't see you for Thanksgiving, so you guys have a good holiday.
Yeah.
Have a
happy
great Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you, you too.
right,
Happy
thanks.
Thanksgiving.
Happy
Stay safe.
Thanksgiving. Bye.
Bye.
All
This
right.
conference is no longer